If it's in the Baltic Sea and it's going to be going to Kaliningrad, that certainly is a sign too, because right now, with Sweden and Finland joining NATO, with the fighting in Ukraine going, a lot of the bullying happening between Russia and the Nordic Baltic countries, having a Russian warship go through the straits, the Danish straits there, into the Baltic Sea. It adds a little drama, if you will.
So, Jim, a fleet of Russian warships packed with thousands of tons of weapons is heading toward the English Channel. It's heading towards a Russian port in the Baltic Sea. Why would Putin's warships be taking this journey? It's kind of going like away from Syria and then kind of all the way around. It's a bit of like a convoluted route.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. I think if they had their druthers, they'd be going through the Bosphorus Straits into the Black Sea, which is where these ships probably originated from. They're Black Sea fleet ships, but because of the war in Ukraine right now, the Turks have closed the Bosphorus Straits to warships, and so they can't go back up through the to go where they'd rather go. Instead, they're having to go to an anchorage, whether it's in the Baltic or up in the Northern Fleet area too, up of Murmansk, in northern Norway. We'll see where they end up going. But cutting through the English Channel is not so unusual. This is something we've seen them do, and there's this also a matter of showing the flag. That's what navies do. The UK is showing its flag too by shadowing and escorting that vessel through the English Channel, which is something important for everyone, particularly the Russians, to see that the Royal Navy is on the guard, and I'm sure the French Navy is doing its bit as well. So the Allies are tracking this ship as it goes through up to wherever its final destination. If it's in the Baltic Sea and it's going to be going to Kaliningrad, that certainly is a sign too, because right now, with Sweden and Finland joining NATO, with the fighting in Ukraine going, a lot of the bullying happening between Russia and the Nordic Baltic countries, having a Russian warship go through the straits, the Danish straits there, into the Baltic Sea. It adds a little drama, if you will, to that part of the world. It shows the Russian flag there as well in terms of being a warship. The Allies will pick up the guard after the Royal Navy hands off to them. But also that ship could be going further north. It could be going up to the great anchorage and naval facilities of the Northern Fleet, which is up in the Arctic of Murmansk. It's where the Russians have their submarines that can launch ballistic missiles. It has Russian naval aviation. It's quite a bastion up there for the Northern Fleet. So it could be going up there, depending on whether it's equipped to handle those kinds of waters. So it'll be interesting to see where the ship goes. But certainly it does show the Russians retreating from their Mediterranean position, and we'll see how they recover from losing their anchorage there in Syria.
Yeah, the Russian ship is heading into the Baltic Sea to Kaliningrad. Um, Part of the reason why Putin's having to take this route is he's taking supplies away from Syria. He was told that he could have kept the naval bases in Syria if he handed over Assad after he was overthrown, but he didn't do that. And now he has asylum in Moscow. But surely it would be more use to Putin to have those naval bases than it is just to have Assad in Moscow. Why do you think that he's made that decision?
Well, it's a great question of what's of greater interest to Putin, Assad and giving him asylum, or those bases. My feeling is that Putin wants to have it both ways. He doesn't want to have to make any decision, and I think, keeping Assad is, giving Assad asylum. It's something, Putin has friends and allies globally too, and they're not always good people that he's partners with. And I think he has to make sure that those partners know that working with Russia means that if something happens to them and they need to have asylum in Russia, that Russia will give them asylum. So it's part of a devil's a devil's agreement, if you will, between two unsavory leaders, where that junior partner, if you will, knows they've got a safe place in case things don't go well, and a coup or whatever it is that they may be doing with Russia's involvement. But also in terms of Syria, it's still early days, and I'm sure the Russians feel that with the right amount of money or whatever it might be that the Syrians want, or if the Syrians get disillusioned with working with the West, that maybe they feel the West owes them something, or they make unreasonable demands of the West and they don't get it, that maybe the time will be ripe for Russia to re-enter the arena there in Syria and say, look, you didn't get what you wanted out of the West. We can give it to you, but in return, we want to go back to our base. So I think he's playing for time. If anything, he doesn't want to. He doesn't. Well, he want at the end of the day, he wants to have it both ways, and he's been surprisingly good at getting that kind of thing. He's got a long game going.
Obviously, with the news that we've had of Trump's plans for a peace deal, European leaders, including in the UK, have said, they've come out and said that Europe really needs to be part of that deal, as does Ukraine. Do you think we could see Putin do a bit more of this? Like I think it was about a month ago, the Secretary of Defense here, John Healey, he said that there was a Russian warship spotted in UK waters. There's now this happening. Do you think we could see kind of stuff like this happen a bit more frequently as that peace deal is happening, almost as a bit of a taunt from Russia?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's not necessarily just during these negotiations, which that can always have an impact. Showing your flag at an opportune time at in the middle of negotiations can be helpful. But I think what we certainly will see is, as a result of these negotiations, if Putin ends up being the real winner, that there's a lot of concessions made to Putin. He gets a lot of what he wants. Ukraine doesn't get a whole lot. So it looks like Putin emerges as the victor. That will certainly embolden him to further bully European nations. If it looks like the West is no longer really supported by the U.S., saying this, that we've kind of walked away from Ukraine, we've given it to the Europeans and saying, look, we've got you a ceasefire and now over to you to get things done. And so we don't seem to have an interest in it. Well, Putin will love to see that. And he will express that love by doing those kinds of things. Suddenly, you've got Russian overflights in your airspace every now and then. You mentioned the Russian warship passing close through your waters. You've got GPS jamming. You've got misinformation campaigns, the things that the Nordic Baltic nations are already seeing. I think you might see that on a broader perspective as Russia kind of softens up Europe for increased influence coming out of Moscow, trying to influence things in Europe without worrying about the U.S. running to the aid of the Europeans. So I think what you point out could very well be something we'll see much more of at the end of these negotiations if Putin feels he's gotten what he wanted.